Today we have on our Who's Who program Mary Sue Garner. Now, if you've been here more than 2 years, you probably know Mary Sue Garner. If you've only been here a short time, a year, perhaps you don't. But you've seen her pictures in the Villager because she sells her pictures to the Villager almost every month. She was president of our resident council for 2 years. And she was all over the place, always receptive to people, and so a lot of you got to know Mary Sue Garner during that period. It's my pleasure to have you on, Mary Sue. I'm sorry I didn't have you earlier. I can't tell you why, because I don't know why, but you know, I'm delighted that you came on this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And so let's talk about, we're going to talk about your life.
Okay.
We're going to talk about all of your life. Where were you born?
I was born in a small town in Texas called Hughes Springs.
Hughes?
Now, it's spelled Hughes Springs, but down there they say Hughes Springs.
Hughes, and it's named for a guy named Hughes who probably settled the area.
I think that was probably correct.
Yeah.
All I know is I was born there.
You know, you were born there.
And it was in a clinic, the doctor's clinic.
Oh.
My father was stationed in Waco, Texas, and my mother's family.
That's a long ways away from Hughes.
Well, and my mother's family was from Avenger, which is about 10 miles away from Hughes Springs, where the doctor was, Dr. Jenkins. And when I was born, he tells me that he had to stop and pick up ice and bring it to Avenger first because he passed the ice house for the ice boxes.
Oh,
so he had to deliver the ice first, and then he came to the clinic, and then he was in the room when I was born. So modern.
You had cold fingers, huh?
I had cold fingers. So that was my beginning.
I see. All right. Well, so your dad was over in Waco. Mm-hmm. And
Yes.
I guess he was in the Air Forces.
Well, I think at that time it was the Army Air Corps, but eventually was the
right?
Air Force.
Yeah, 43. It was the Army Air
Yeah.
Corps.
Yeah.
I was in the Army Air Corps.
Oh well, maybe you ran into him sometime.
46.
Okay.
Just before, a year before it became the U.S. Air Force.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I didn't run into him.
Okay. If you did, you don't remember.
Well, yeah, that's probably true too. Anyway, you were born in Hughes, over in East Texas, and your dad was over in Waco. So you joined. I presume you all joined your dad after a few months, or
I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, anyway, all right.
I have no idea.
I'm sure you don't remember that.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
My first memory started when we moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Ah.
But before that, we went to Germany and Austria right after the war. Yeah. We were there, and my younger sister was born in Munich. So I have two sisters. The older one is not the older one, the middle one. She's a year younger than I am, so we're closer in that way. But we were over there for 2 or 3 years, and apparently my sister and I learned to speak German fluently. Oh. But when we came back to the United States, everybody wanted to hear us speak, and so we just forgot it totally. Yeah. But we moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and we're there for 5 years.
So you have two sisters and no brothers, just the three.
No brothers.
And what are they? Are they still living? Are they still?
Yes.
Yeah.
My one sister, Margaret, is in Woodbridge.
Oh yeah.
So I just had lunch with her on Saturday.
Oh good.
And the other one is in Stevens City, which is just outside of Winchester.
Stevens City.
Stevens City. It's like a suburb of Winchester.
Oh okay.
Yeah.
So you all have gravitated to Northern Virginia from well, not all of you were born in Hughes, Texas.
Right. No. But we ended up here because my father, after he retired here, and my sisters found husbands here, and they settled here. So.
Okay, so you were never married.
No.
Okay. So, you said you moved to Cheyenne, so
Yes.
that I presume that's where you started school. And
yeah, I was in grades 1 through 5 when we were in Cheyenne. Yeah. At that time, my father was the manager of the officers club for most of that time. Ah. And then my mother became manager of the BOQ,
which is Bachelor Officers
Quarters. Yeah, and we lived in a barracks, the bottom half.
Okay.
which was wonderful because we had these huge rooms or small rooms, depending on which walls they knocked down.
I've seen many of those old barracks turned into family quarters.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
And some of them, in Leavenworth, we have World War I barracks turned into quarters, and you had sheets that were separating rooms.
Yeah, yeah.
Not so good.
Yeah, that's about it.
Keep going. We're in Cheyenne.
We're in Cheyenne. Yeah. And one of my memories that I liked was my father had to run the bingo at the officers' club, so he had to get the gifts and prizes, and he did that by driving to Denver. Apparently there was an outlet store or something there, and depending on the time, day, whatever, we would get to go with him. So I remember going with him to Denver and seeing all these toys. And of course, we didn't get any of them. We didn't get to play bingo.
I see.
But it was a fond memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite a trip from Cheyenne to Denver, isn't it?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we would go and spend the night and come back the next day.
Yeah, I bet you did.
And yeah.
Well, being in the BOQ and being let's see, Cheyenne, we have the the Francis Warren Air Base.
Francis E. Warren Air Force Base.
Yeah, that was a pretty good sized air base.
It was.
Yeah,
and I didn't know much about any of that.
Yeah.
You know, in grades 1 through 5, you're just kind of just being a youngster.
Yeah.
But living in the BOQ, we had lots of people coming in and out all the time. A lot of like when the Air Force flying teams would come in, they'd stay there. So we get to meet all those people. And one of the memories I have of my family telling me, my father telling me, is that because he ran the officers club, then he dealt with entertainers also. And they usually stayed there. And one of them was Louis Armstrong.
Wow.
And apparently one afternoon, evening, he started playing his trumpet and waking up everybody who had to sleep. And so they went and talked to him about it. Said, you know, do you really need to practice? Yes, I need to practice. And my mother said, you can't practice here because people have to sleep. So he ended up practicing in our car in the parking lot.
Okay.
So
Well,
an interesting little piece of history.
You say you had people sleeping in the afternoon.
Well, yeah, Air Force pilots flying in, having to, they had a few hours to sleep and then they had to fly out. So it was that kind of
Now that was
place.
a B-52 base too, or
Yeah, I don't know.
B-47s and
I don't know.
B-50s, I think, and that.
Yeah.
But you had pilots who flew long distances and probably a couple of days. They weren't always. It wasn't just a local trip.
I don't know about there, but when we went to the next stop, we went to was Moses Lake, Washington.
Oh, okay.
And there, I know they had B-52s.
Okay.
And so we lived, in the housing on base, and everybody around worked on the B-52s, and we just know that one day all the men were gone. And they'd be gone for a week, flying these B-52s around the world or wherever they went to, because they couldn't tell us.
Yeah.
But that was interesting watching those planes take off and land.
It's a big plane.
Big plane, yeah. And
Well,
so that's.
You got any stories from school in Moses Lake?
Not really.
Yeah.
I know that they built the year we got there. They had built a new junior high school or middle school, whichever it was called, in the town of Moses Lake, and so that's where we went to school. The buses would pick us up like 7 o'clock in the morning, but school didn't start until 9.
Oh, gee.
But they were military buses. But what the trade-off was, we had to go, and then our buses would go pick up the local people and take them. So I guess it was a trade-off in terms of how to support us in school. And then we would end up staying until like 5, because they would take the other people home first and then pick us up and we'd go home. So, it was not a hardship, but it was different.
It wasn't a friendship. It wasn't.
It was a lot of time at school.
Yeah.
Well, we got our homework done in the evenings, before we got home.
In the morning when you got there, I presume you went and you could finish your homework if you hadn't or whatever.
Right. But that's about all I remember about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was grades 7,
6 and 7.
6 and 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for 8th grade, my father got transferred to Wiesbaden, Germany. And back in those days, we couldn't just hop on the plane and fly with him. We had to wait till he got housing. So we knew there was going to be 6, 8 months we had to wait. So my mother and the 3 of us went to her parents' house and back to Texas. Yeah. So I went to school there for about 6 months in 8th grade. That was interesting because I turned out to be student number 13 in the 8th grade class. And I was used to big schools. So it was a different experience. Plus they had this southern accent that I just didn't understand.
I see.
But you kind of got used to it. Yeah. And they would call me this Yankee because I didn't have that accent. I said, I'm not a Yankee. I was born here.
I was born here.
Yeah.
And I guess all of them were born there too. So
absolutely.
So you really couldn't say.
Yeah. So a little hard to fit in, but we managed.
Well, that fitting in, that's a good point because how did you work the fitting in? You probably don't remember the Cheyenne 1 through 5 fitting in. That wasn't, but Moses Lake you probably do.
Yeah, and one of the things that helped is that my sister's just a year younger.
Yeah.
So there were at least 2 of us. My younger sister, she was, I don't know if she's in school yet then, but anyway, she was, I guess. But that helped a lot. And my sister was very outgoing. Yeah. And so, and the family always did things together. We took trips all over the Northeast up there, Northwest. We'd go to Canada and spend a week. Oh. We'd go to Spokane and spend a week.
Did you have a trailer or something?
No, we just hop in the car and go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wondered about the fitting in because my kids also had more schools than you did. Most of them had 3 high schools, but you were in Wiesbaden. And what did you? Now you can evaluate the school. Mm-hmm. How did you look at the military school there in Wiesbaden? I presume you went to the DOD school.
Yeah. H.H. Arnold High School. And
H.H. Arnold.
H.H. Arnold. Okay. Yeah, HAP, I think he was. It was a very good school. Much more challenging than my 8th grade in Texas. Yeah. And we fit in because everybody there was in the same situation we were. They had all been transferred there, had been somewhere else, were always moving. But my parents always made a point of saying when it was time to move, we're just taking on a new adventure, and it's going to be fine. And we make the best of it. And when we would get there, they would make sure that we traveled, took advantage of where we were. So we did a lot of traveling in Europe as a family. Yeah. And I think all of that helped. And it helped that our apartment was right across the street from the school. So I could get there really quickly.
We did that. We also did that in moving. And not only did that, but we had the same curtains, the same furniture, and we usually arranged it about the same every place we went. So the change to the kids wasn't really a great big change, except the people, the other kids in the school. And we found the DOD school in Turkey to be a good school also. Yeah. And we had a State Department school in Greece, but the DOD schools, I think, probably are fairly good.
Oh, I think so too. Yeah. I had a good education there.
Yeah.
I really did. And we had a lot of State Department students in our school.
Sure.
We had a dorm where they stayed because the parents you couldn't commute.
Yeah.
So that was also right across the other street from us.
You were lucky.
Yeah. And the church was right across the street, and the rec center was right across the street. So I was on a good corner.
Any other good story? Any good stories about your travels around?
Well, I know one that would interest a lot of people is that the time we were there was when Elvis Presley was stationed in Frankfurt, I think, or Mainz. I don't remember which he was at. And so he was in the paper all the time. And then Priscilla Below, or Presley now, she went to our school. She lived down the street from us. Oh. That's when she was in 9th grade. So you knew her? Yeah. I didn't really, but I knew who she was. Yeah. And that's when she started, if you ever read anything about that history, that's when she started going over and meeting him and dating him in 9th grade. And so we all knew about it. At that time, I was on the school newspaper, and we wanted to interview her, do a little article, and she turned us down flat. No, she wasn't going to do that.
Now, she was in the 9th grade, and you were in the 8th grade? Or?
I was in the 11th grade at that time, I think.
So you were ahead of her?
Yeah, I was ahead of her. Yeah, yeah. So that was an interesting part, that we had that little bit.
Surprising she didn't want to be interviewed.
Well, she was in 9th grade, and she was dating this soldier who was much older.
Yeah.
So it wasn't something that she needed to put out there. In the newspaper, the local military newspaper, there were always pictures every weekend of Elvis with some woman.
Yeah.
And so we knew he wasn't always with these women; he was with her.
Yeah.
So the story wasn't quite right in the paper. It was just, that's when you learn that you can't always believe those kinds of papers, those kinds of news stories.
That's for sure. Any story on Elvis?
No.
I admire Elvis for having gone into the service and actually being part of the units. And although I'm sure he was always a celebrity in the units, but nevertheless,
but he did his duty.
He did that, and I thought that was
and that was all, to me it was all positive, that things I heard about him.
Yeah.
I did see him perform in Shreveport, Louisiana, long before that.
Before that.
Yeah, and it would have been a wonderful concert, but everybody around me was screaming all the time, so you couldn't hear him sing.
Yeah.
So I much prefer watching him on TV.
Well, so are you a fan of Elvis then? Is that?
Not particularly, but my sister was.
Oh, it's your sister?
She had Elvis pictures everywhere.
Okay.
But I listened to his music, yeah.
All right. So did you finish school in?
I finished the 11th grade.
Okay.
My junior year, and then my father was transferred to the Pentagon. So we came to Alexandria, and we moved to Alexandria because my mother got a job teaching in Alexandria. So we were just down the street from that.
Did she teach anywhere else?
She taught in Germany, actually. She usually had jobs on the bases that were, well, she was head of the thrift shop, she was head of the nursery school, she was head of she had a college education, and she wanted to work, and these jobs worked for her. And when we got to Germany, she started substituting.
Oh.
And so she was substituting, I don't know, 4th grade probably, and one of the teachers had to leave, and so they offered her the job.
Oh.
So we had a family meeting. Does mom teach school full time, or does she stay home and take care of us and do the washing and the cooking and all that?
But this time you all are.
Yeah, we're in high school.
Teenagers.
Yeah. And so it was our decision. Yeah. We had a say-so in it.
Yeah.
And the downside was that we would have to do some of the cooking, we would have to wash the clothes, we'd have to clean the house.
Which was really a plus.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But, the upside was we would have more money if she's working. We could do more things. So we voted on, let's let her work.
Did you always have family councils like that?
No, that's the only one I really remember, because that was a really big decision.
Sure it was.
And we were teenagers, as you say, so we were going to have, it was going to affect us a lot. But I mean, the school was right across the street, so it wasn't like she was going to have to travel and all that. But so that was a big decision we made, and it was a good decision.
Was she your teacher?
No, but she was my youngest sister's teacher.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So that was interesting. But and she was in the elementary school, and my older sister and I were in the high school. So, But so when we came back, we knew it was important that she did continue working, because here it's a little higher expenses and all that. We had to find a house.
That's right.
Yeah. So she got a job at Mount Vernon Elementary School in Alexandria, and my sister and I went to George Washington High School down the street a ways, and so I graduated from there, as did both of my sisters.
Now, how did you came from Germany, and you said the schooling was good in Germany. So when you became a senior at the Alexandria High School, how did you compare yourself with the other students?
Academically, it was not a problem.
Yeah.
English was my only problem.
Oh, I see.
And that was because
they didn't understand German.
That's right, yeah. The biggest problem was in Alexandria, there was a program where you had to write a term paper and you did that in several years, so the culminating term paper was your senior year, and I hadn't had to do that. I had no idea how to do a term paper.
Yeah.
So I had to learn everything from scratch, and that was my most difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
But I managed.
Good.
You know. But other than that, you know, because I had my sister, we fit in. We did fine. Academically, it was a really good school. After that, I went to Radford College, which is now university. And then after my 4 years there, came back to Alexandria to teach.
Yeah, that's my part of the country.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had people from your part of the
yeah?
country going there. A lot of them, actually.
And I had my grandfather who lived in Pulaski, and my uncle and aunt who worked at Radford, the Radford ammunition plant there.
Yes. Well, and I did my student teaching in Pulaski.
Did you?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yes, not my student teaching, my practice teaching while I was in college.
So at Radford then, was that a teacher's college then?
Women's teachers college, all women.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, like the second largest in the country.
Okay.
You know, a lot of women there. We were the women's division of VPI. We had the same board of directors.
Oh, okay.
So we did a lot of things with tech at that time.
Okay, so now you're a school teacher.
Now I'm a school teacher.
In Alexandria.
In Alexandria.
And which high school?
T.C. Williams High School.
Which is a
1965.
big high school.
Which is a fairly big high school.
Yeah.
And I was there. My first year of teaching was the first year T.C. Williams opened.
Yeah.
So we had grades 8 through 11. You can't have a senior class the first year. And I taught 8th grade that year. And then each year I got promoted.
Oh, okay.
So the next year we didn't have 8th graders. I taught 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th.
Yeah.
And I was there for 6 years. Learned a lot.
Now this is
grew
about
up
1965, 66?
1965 to 71.
71, okay.
And then they reorganized the school system. And we went to what they call the 6222 plan. So TC became just 11th and 12th graders at that time.
Oh.
And GW and Hammond, the other two high schools, became 9th and 10th grade schools. So I went to the 9th, 10th grade school because I needed to change.
Yeah. And
so then I taught at GW for 22 years. So I graduated from there and then taught there. So I have a long life at GW.
And you probably had some of the teachers still there.
Yes, absolutely. Taught with some of the same teachers, which was an interesting experience. And then to turn it around later, some of my students came to teach, and I taught with students I taught.
Well, you taught for how many years?
45.
45 years. 45
years.
That's
after GW, I went to Minnie Howard. They reorganized again.
What is Minnie Howard?
Minnie Howard is the 9th grade part of T.C. Williams High School. Oh. They put all the 9th graders in the city in one school.
Oh, is that right?
And it was because they needed space for the younger kids coming up.
Yeah.
So they just changed everything again, and we became specialized. You know, we learned what 9th graders were all about. And it worked out really well, I think.
Does they still have that system?
They still have that system.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Except it's now called T.C. Williams 9th grade center. You know.
Oh, okay.
But yes, it worked out really well. But I learned a lot in teaching. I had some good years. I had some bad years.
Anything you look back on is more important than others, or more?
You know, people ask me the question about the kids.
Yeah.
And one of the things I know about the students I taught were they didn't change much. Kids stayed about like this. Every now and then there were humps and dips and whatever. But that was because of what was happening in society. As society changed, some of those things changed. But in my classroom, with my door closed, teaching algebra and geometry, that doesn't change.
Yeah.
And although we moved into technology, so that changed a lot.
Yeah.
Technology was a big part of what I did. When I first started teaching, I guess it was probably the second year, I had the opportunity to take a computer programming class.
Oh, okay.
Learn Fortran.
Okay.
With punched cards, if you remember that.
Yeah, I took that. I did too.
Yeah, that was something else. And then the next year they decided they wanted to teach a computer programming class. And I was the youngest teacher. I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I had to teach it because I'd taken the class. We had others who had taught it, and they said, no, I took the class. Yeah. So I taught a computer literacy class, a semester course. We were programming in Fortran using a teletype machine.
Yeah.
So I had a teletype machine in the room. The problem was we only had 45, 55 minutes in class. I had 25 kids, and only one person could be typing at a time. Yeah. And we time shared with some company over in Maryland. I mean, we were early in time sharing. So the next year I got 2 teletype machines. One was online all the time, the other one was not, but so 2 people could work at it. Biggest problem was the telephone calls went through the switchboard. The switchboard would see that the phone has been on for a long time, so they click it off. Yeah. So we had to get a dedicated line. So all those learning experiences were really interesting and good for me.
Well, those were the early days of learning computing too for kids. Well, Mary Sue, we're almost out of time.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, where'd we go? But we need to talk. How did you decide to come to Green Spring?
I had retired.
Yeah. And
across the highway, I lived in Seminary Towers in Alexandria. Across the highway, they were building a BRAC building. And it was close to the building being finished. They hadn't done anything about traffic, changing the way things were over there, and I knew it was going to get bad. So I knew I had to think about moving. A friend came here to check it out and asked me if I'd come, so I did. And after about a week, I thought, I'm going to put my name on the priority list. So I made an appointment with Sheila, came down, gave her my check, and she says, after we talked for a while, I have an apartment that you might really like. Let's go look at it. Okay. So we went and looked at it, and I said, all right, but I can't move in until July. This was April. She says, that's perfect because we still have to renovate the apartment. And so here I am. Just that. So I didn't get to go to any of the sales events or anything like that.
Me either.
Yeah.
Now, we've got about 30 seconds.
Okay.
You've participated in a lot of activities, and do you have any suggestions for new residents?
Oh, yes. Yes, I think new residents should take some time to see what's out there, and then they need to start volunteering. Yeah. And just see where your interests are, try something out. If it doesn't work, try something else. But join a committee with the resident council, find out what's going on there, and have a great time living here.
Yeah. Well, it is a great time living here.
It is.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.